Good evening, I'm Yvette Gonzalez, and tonight we are discussing Afghanistan past, present, and future. I'm more than honored having the three of the most influential voices in the public community. So let's welcome Trevor Coult, Tori Richards, and Emir Hadžić. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So the biographies of my guests are incredible. I need to take time to summarize it all. Trevor Coult, during his 20-year service, he remarkably completed 10 operational deployments. Operations in Iraq, 4 more deployments to Afghanistan. He was awarded a military cross for his actions during a complex ambush involving a suicide bomber and a machine gun position in Baghdad. Trevor was involved in 178 engagements with enemy forces during his time on the front line and survived 3 IED explosions. Today, Trevor is one of the strongest voices in the veterans community and champions mental health. Such an honor to have you, Trevor. We have Tori Richards, Washington Examiner investigative reporter, who brought us the stories that you will not read in mainstream media, including Taliban control of North Afghanistan is propaganda. And this is the story of the Taliban that the entire world brought to you, but failed to question its credibility and integrity. Now, Tori has questioned the credibility and went to the credible sources. So good to have you on the show, Tori. This is going to be an interesting story, Tori, right?
Yes, because it just seems a lot of the press is so anxious to talk to the Taliban, and so they just repeat whatever they have to say. And Reuters did that, unfortunately. It was false.
This is exactly what we see. This is exactly what we see in mainstream media. This is not what we're going to do tonight. We have, last but not least, Emir Hadžić is a retired U.S. Marine Corps infantry unit leader, human rights advocate, and a police officer. Native to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Emir and his family immigrated to the United States in 1995 as refugees, motivated in part by peacekeeping deployment of the U.S. military to his native country. In 1996, Emir enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps and served for 20 years until his retirement in 2016. Emir completed 8 overseas deployments or supported military operations throughout Eastern Pacific Rim, Eastern Europe, North Africa, including 3 combat tours to Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, the Taliban have taken over 2/3 of the country in matter of days, 11 to be exact. Now, I would like to have your take on this. Trevor, we'll start with you.
Well, the Taliban were always in control, if I'm honest. We were there as 20 years as guests, thinking we were in control. But I believe the US and UK government knew from the very start that the Afghan government was corrupt. But we played along with it. I made it look like we were in charge.
And Trevor, you are very critical of the governments of the British, but also the US. You openly say you feel betrayed. And you said the West spent $3 trillion in 20 years of investment in Afghanistan, in Afghanistan's community to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. What did you mean by that?
Well, America's always been the UK's strongest ally. But we've always played second fiddle. It's never been an equal partnership. There's never been a special relationship. The UK, and I know this from front-hand experience because I work with the Intelligence Exploitation Force, and I know that the UK always shared its intelligence with the US, but the US were very, very reluctant to share their intelligence with the UK. It's been a one-sided relationship, and I think President Biden right now has sealed the fate of it, and it's about to end. I think what the US President did was disgusting. He might as well have urinated over 3,502 British and American and allies' deaths out there. I feel it's for nothing. You know, at the minute in the UK, we've got 7,000 amputees because of Afghanistan. We've 26,000 casualties, and we just handed it over. Now, the one thing that I am critical of, and I'm sure Emir, I don't know how Emir feels about this, but why would you do a deal with the Taliban and not tell your allies? Why would you give all your equipment to the Taliban and not give it to NATO? You know, there's no excuse for the incompetence coming from the White House today. And I do believe that the Biden administration is more of a threat to the West than the actual Taliban.
Tori, we will go to you now. In the beginning of our introduction, we said that media has reported on the alleged fall of the northern province, and we have this opportunity to see how mainstream media comes with information and how everything is just copy-paste. Now, you made sure that you find credible sources and that you go to legitimate sources and you find the credible stories. The celebratory gunfire erupted over the skies of Kabul, Afghanistan on Friday, and it reports that the Taliban had finally seized the complete control of the country by defeating resistance in the northern part of Afghanistan. Now, what have you found regarding this breaking news that has come across all around the world?
Well, initially I was instructed to write that story, and I have a very good source who is the general of the Special Operations Forces of America. And he helped create the Afghan army and train them and all of the police chiefs in the villages. And his name's General Don Baldock. So he was in command for 10 tours over there. I immediately called him and I said, "What is this?" And he sent me a video of the gunfire just erupting over the skies. And it was just terrifying for people. And he said, "It's fake." I am in contact with both Afghan soldiers on the ground for the resistance and then my guys from Special Operations who are still in the country trying to help with evacuations. And they are in northern Afghanistan now, and they are fighting the Taliban. It is totally false. He wants the United States to step up and help the northern province where the vice president is now holed up there leading the resistance. And he wants all the generals fired at the top for being just derelict in their duty. He says it's just a sham and it's just horrible the way the United States has conducted this. So he wants a whole new slate of generals to go in there, assist the northern province, and he thinks the Taliban could be driven out with the assistance of America doing it the right way, which is not imposing Western values on Afghanistan, but rather assisting them in the way they want to fight.
That is an interesting piece of information that we are getting, and this is why I'm going to Emir at this moment. Before we even comment on that, Emir, would you tell us something about, because our audiences are very, very interested, your path from Bosnia to US and becoming a serviceman, before we comment on the piece of information that we just received from Tori?
Certainly. I moved to the United States in 1995. I lived in California, and that's where I really had a reality check of what America really is, instead of what I thought America would be. And in many ways, it was exactly what I expected it to be, but in other ways, it was much different. There were certain parts of the United States where that were just totally inaccessible to somebody like me due to unbelievable amount of crime there. And there are other parts of America that are incredibly inaccessible to me due to my financial situation at the time. But I was impressed with the way Americans received this. I was impressed with the way many church groups reached out to us and checked on us to make sure that we are not starting from, living on the street and things of that nature. They supplied us with furniture. So, we can have that human dignity as we're starting our life in America, which is, quite the contrast the way immigrants were received in the United States back in the 1800s. So, I decided, I looked for the ways to sort of repay to those good-hearted Americans. And, having had some exposure to combat from Bosnia, I decided it would be a good idea to serve about 4 years in the U.S. military. I chose the Marine Corps because of its mission and a multitude of other reasons. And I don't regret it. I happened to have stay for much longer than 4 years because having been stationed in Hawaii for the first 4, I extended for a couple more years to go back stateside. And I was stationed just south of Washington, D.C. in Virginia. when 9/11 happened, and that affected me tremendously. I felt that I was under attack again in my new homeland, that I never dreamed that I would be under attack out of all places in America in such way. So I decided to stay in the military for as long as I could. And, around 20-year mark, but I noticed everything is winding down combat-wise. I decided to take on a new mission and continue serving America, but more on a local level and as a public servant.
And you have stayed there until your retirement in 2016. What do you gather of everything that has happened in the past couple of days? It's been 4 or 5 days now since the U.S. and the allies left Kabul, left Afghanistan. And do you think evacuation process was premeditated? It was right thing to do? The way it has been conducted, was it the right way it has been conducted? And I'm just saying this and referring to some of your social media posts as well. So I'm just wondering, how do you gather everything that has happened in the past couple of days?
Nobody that I know and agree with is questioning the decision to pull out. However, many of us are questioning the way it was conducted. We believe that gathering of political points and raising of political capital on behalf of our current administration was far more important than was to get this done correctly. We've been alerting Biden administration since April, when he announced that the new pullout timeline is going to be September 11th. We've been advocating on behalf of our special immigration visa eligible Afghans and their families since April. We've been offering this administration so many opportunities to get the process going, something that we've been advocating for decades. And we've been met with a certain amount of disinterest where everything else was prioritized. So naturally, my group of human rights activists who've been advocating on behalf of special immigration visa program for both Iraq and Afghanistan, we were livid. If I was to truly express how I feel here, you would need to bleep me out. So I'm going to try to keep it civil. We have advised Biden administration for so long, and many of my friends have receipts of that. We've done it through op-eds. We've done it through actual meetings with some of the lower level cabinet members in hopes of raising to a little more higher echelons of Biden administration so we can get the evacuation going. Second, what we've been hearing from Biden administration publicly has had a great deal of contrast to what we've been hearing on the ground from our friends in Kabul and other parts of Afghanistan. I believe that our government painted a rosy picture in order to salvage as much face as they could, because the withdrawal process has been, mildly put, a complete disaster. I do have to give credit where it's due. The fact that we have evacuated, that the Americans and our allies have evacuated, more than 120,000 individuals in such a short period of time is nothing short of miraculous and worthy of every praise. However, it did not have to be this way. We could have started a quiet evacuation way back in April if we've only prioritized our special immigration visa eligible individuals and allowed them to receive paperwork so they can leave their country quietly aboard civilian aircraft. And now so many of them are in hiding because so many of them have been left behind.
Tori, why do you think there has been such a rush to evacuate? Like Emir said, it could have been done completely differently. We could have taken more time to get more people out. And why such rush? Why evacuate first the military and the guns and then start evacuating people? I understand evacuate people who are connected to the U.S. and the allies, but what about all those who are staying and are left behind without anything that they can, any help that they can get from outside anymore? Because in the past, in the last couple of days of evacuations, it was almost impossible to get to the airport. Now, who is responsible for that?
So first I want to say the American people are on the side of the Afghans and the people stuck there. No one is on the side of Joe Biden. Even the mainstream media here in America, which normally excuses everything that happens with the White House, they are against him. So it's just the whole world's against him. He created this. He was more concerned with doing other things, such as opening the border to Mexico and the refugee problem down there, than Afghanistan. I mean, he just was not concerned with it. And then he has generals at the top who are in hearings with our Congress talking about how they want women to have equal rights. They want people not to speak a certain way that's politically incorrect. I mean, that was their main focus, and they even said that and testified to that. So that's just horrible that he has these generals talking about what's politically correct or not worrying about Afghanistan. So it's just bad advice from them. And then President Biden just has another set of priorities, and it's not Afghanistan. And I think he just thought he could do it all together at the end, and that's not what happened, as you know.
Trevor, I want to go back to you. Yes, go ahead, Emir. Go ahead.
Respectfully, Tori, and again, it is a great privilege and honor to be in such a esteemed company here. But Tori, I have to disagree with you on these generals. The whole hashtag woke generals is unfair to our military. It is unfair to our Department of Defense. We can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. It is totally okay for our top military brass to be concerned with equality and human rights in our ranks. That is okay, but to brand them as woke because we wanted to give transgender troops equal protections as everybody else, is unfair that somehow they were distracted by that instead of worried about Afghanistan. I mean, after all, we've had Afghanistan for 20 years. For 20 years. And, there are individuals who were solely focused on it. I just don't think it would be fair to say that our woke military is the reason why the process was bungled over in Kabul. I don't think our so-called woke military is the reason why we turned over all that equipment to Taliban, which we really didn't. And just to kind of address Trevor's concern about why did Americans exclude allies in negotiations? Well, I don't know. I suppose we'll have to ask our previous administration, because I think that they were more concerned about scoring domestic political points rather than ending the war in a responsible manner. And they can say whatever they want. Why did they start negotiating with Taliban without including democratically elected government in Kabul, as well as our allies? And why did they send Ambassador Almay Khalilzad to negotiate with literally no negotiating chips? We did not have the high ground in those negotiations. I believe Taliban held all of the levers of power. And as far as the turning over military equipment to Taliban, we did not turn over anything. We turned it over to Afghan National Army. Afghan National Army managed to lose it in a most spectacular way because they had to abandon their fighting positions. And then again, why wouldn't they? They noticed that Americans were cutting and running. All of their generals who have amassed amazing wealth in foreign banks are cutting and running. Why would they continue fighting against Taliban when the writing was already on the wall? Taliban is going to have that country sooner or later. And so they laid down their arms, and that started the domino effect of just the most upside down and weird withdrawal from Kabul, from all those, hundreds of thousands of civilians? So hope that answers some of the questions that were posted.
You want to get back to that?
Okay, so I disagree. I've been a journalist for 25 years. I'm doing this job 12 hours a day. I'm in contact with several generals at the highest level. They do not agree with what's happening with the command structure. They don't. They publicly said it. 200 of them have signed a letter wanting the White House to, either they want Joe Biden to step down or just go away, let somebody competent handle this. It's these generals that are in power that have had us in this 20-year war with no resolution. It's these people. So no, they're not confident. The upper levels of the rank, who are the really good guys, they don't think that. A lot of the mainstream media are questioning them.
Here I'm listening to two Americans arguing about an American disaster. So, you know, it's fantastic to sit back as an ally and hear this happening. It's okay, as Emir just said there, for some reason America's split. You know, you have the Biden crew, the Trump crew. I'm going to be honest, outside America, no one cares, okay? Let's get that quite straight. A lot of people seem to be quite blaming Biden. I do, because he's the guy in the hot seat. You know, at the end of the day, there is a command structure. The guy in the hot seat is a guy that can stop things. Each president has 100 days to try and influence perfect changes. He had that opportunity. He blew it. Now, it's okay to turn around and say that this is from the previous administration. However, Trump had lots of flaws, millions of them. However, he spoke to our prime minister. He spoke to our prime minister. He negotiated things with our prime minister. I honestly do not know how any American can justify not speaking to your allies and speaking to the enemy. There's no way. Now, the both of you need to give your head a shake, because we, the UK, entered Afghanistan on your request. And you turned your back and pissed off and left us there. And there's no excuse for that whatsoever. None. None Emir and none Tori. You know what? I'm one of tens of thousands of veterans just across the UK that are fuming at the American White House. Not the American military, I'm going to be honest with you. They are professional, and they work hard. Our veterans communities work together. You know what? The citizens work together. But for some reason, your administration has turned its back on the West, and he will never be forgiven. The only way to rectify this is to remove that fool that's the leader of the free world. And there's no excuse for it. So it's okay you arguing about this and arguing about that. At the end of the day, the strategic withdrawal of Afghanistan was certainly not on a military fashion. So I do agree with Emir. This had not, I honestly believe it's got nothing to do with the generals. It's very quick for the president to turn around and say, I'm going to sack the generals and get rid of them, because a lot of generals won't speak out because they can be sacked and destroyed. So they're not going to question the president, are they? They don't even do it in my own country. So no one's going to question him.
Where is the responsibility? Where is the chain of responsibility? This is now what we should try to answer. Now, we have a chain of responsibility. Now, who is responsible for such a bad
President Biden's administration. President Biden's administration.
Oh, look,
and the politicians. This is a political thing. This has got nothing to do with any of the militaries.
All right, so political thing, but nobody thinks about people and the new regime that it is. And the U.S. policy and UK policy has always been, we never negotiate with the terrorists, right?
They are the old Northern Alliance. They are the old Northern Alliance which the British trained and the Americans gave weapons to. So they're going to be quite hard to beat.
All right.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. However, you know how politics are.
Yeah, but
you know
politics.
How,
we
you know
go
how
back
these
to the
diplomats,
politics.
Yeah.
All right, Emir, go ahead.
Of course,
because
that's the root of it all. The politics is the root of it all. United States have been trying to get out of this so-called forever war for a very long time. And many of our previous presidents and candidates for presidency have been promising to end our involvement in this so-called forever war. The problem with trying to get out of, with Americans trying to get out of forever wars, is that we don't really leave. We don't really end forever wars. We just end our involvement in the forever wars. And just as we noticed in Iraq, and I'm kind of quoting General Petraeus, he's the one that kind of broke it down like this. And just as we saw it in Iraq, we eventually had to go back to fix the problems that were created after we left Iraq in such a rapid fashion. And I'm afraid that we're going to find ourselves in Afghanistan yet again, no matter what President Biden is promising. I suppose President Biden is thinking that he's going to be able to take on the ISIS or Khorasan terrorists through drone strikes. Well, you know, drone diplomacy and drone strategy has a tendency to create more enemies than it eliminates. So I would caution him against that. I would also caution President Biden to retire in dignity after his one term, you know, and, you know, continue being a good man that he's been his whole life, because this, this whole, his calls, his judgments when it comes to Iraq and Afghanistan has been continuously proven wrong time after time, year after year.
Is it dignified retirement for Joe Biden?
There's no such thing as a dignified retirement.
Emir, is it a dignified retirement for Joe Biden?
I think he would save face if he remains one-term president. I believe that that would be the best option for him and Democrat Party, because our vice president has also been less than visible ever since she was put in charge of many different projects that have only gotten worse over here.
Well,
namely,
except
American
she
southern
has
border.
been, Kamala Harris has been very vocal about keep building the wall on the southern border of the United States. We've heard that from her, telling immigrants, do not come to the border, you will not be accepted. And this is, I want to connect this with something that I read about you, and this is where you said that the immigrants are the backbone of U.S. society. I will go back to that, but I want to go back to Tori right now. Tori, I would like to have your take on this discussion we just had. You've written so many articles that are trusted. There have been with credible sources. What is your take on all of this? And a question for everybody. How can we see Taliban parading with U.S. equipment all over the cities? How come? What does that tell us? What does that say and tell the international community, international public? Tori.
I just think it's really bad. The American people, not the politicians, not the upper level of the military, but the American people and the lower level soldiers, their hearts just break for this. They don't think it's a good idea the way it went down. They're horrified at the way our allies are treated. It's been mentioned in the news numerous times that President Biden did not call the UK to advise of this. He did not take calls from the UK for 2 days. So this is inexcusable. And then to see the propaganda of the weapons, and we have videos of people apparently getting shot with gunfire. It's just horrified the whole world. And so now people are wondering, how do we recover from this as America with our reputation? Where do we go from here? And so the best we can do as journalists is try to tell the truth about what's happening on the ground. The people that are still left there tell their stories so they aren't forgotten, and they're important. I received a text message this week from somebody who has a group of 70 people. They are special immigrant visa holders. It's elderly people and children. I'm in California, and there's a mother with 3 children who is stuck there from California. She's an American citizen. So it just seems inexcusable that this is happening. No one has a solution. The State Department in the U.S. has told the operators who are the military, the retired military trying to get people out, to stand down and not do this anymore. So who do they think is going to do this? So all we can do, and you know this, is just try to be the voice for the people that have no voice. And then hopefully with our pressure, maybe there can be some change with the Taliban. They say they want to be a new Taliban and friendlier, and they want to be on the world stage and part of the UN. Well, part of that involves not murdering people. So I just say that we just need to keep on reporting this as much as we can. I would do it 12 hours a day for the next 2 months if it would save people's lives.
Trevor, your take on this?
Well, that was a great take on that from Tori. Emir's coming off with some things which I totally agree with as well, though. So, you know, there is a lot of benefit coming from this. Anyone that's in the military, and U.S. military, will agree with this. All the equipment that was left behind was not left behind by American soldiers. This equipment that was left behind was actually belonging to the Afghan army. Okay, so we need to make that quite clear. It wasn't as if the Americans dropped all the kit and ran. They didn't do that. They took their kit with them. Things that were left behind were things that had been given to the Afghan army. So I just want to clear that up. Now, as far as people that are left behind, whether they are American citizens or UK citizens, allies or Afghans, I honestly believe they'll be safe. And I'll tell you why they'll be safe. Because they're going to be used as hostages. They're going to be used as bargaining chips. You know, my government, the US government, is going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars out to the Taliban, which will help finance them even more in the return for the safe passage of all our allies and all our citizens. So it's been quite cunning. The Taliban
Is that a wrong approach?
Pardon?
Is that a wrong approach?
it's not a wrong approach for the Taliban. That's what they want. Now,
but why are they getting what they want?
Because if they don't,
I think
they'll
it's
kill
just an
people,
unfortunate outcome.
Well,
they're going to kill
I agree with Trevor. I couldn't agree with Trevor
is,
more.
It is not good
it's
for
just
the
an
Afghan
unfortunate
people.
outcome of.
I had guests on my show that said, well, you know, we got tired of being 20 years or having the longest war in history, or we miscalculated evacuations, or it's unfortunate outcome. That does not help the Afghan people. That does not help the women's rights that now we are seeing going back 100 years from now. How do we, what is the right approach to this then? Trevor, I'll go to you.
The thing is, we have to realize, right, the world, look at it as a compass. It has 4 points in it, right? You cannot westernize the whole compass. You cannot westernize the Middle East. It's the Middle East for a reason. Now, they have their way of life. We try to influence the Western culture into their culture. And the truth is, a lot of them want it. They want it. But the majority of the rulers out there don't want it. And I think it's about time that the West, including the UK and the USA clearly, stopped interfering in other people's countries. The minute you remove dictators from a dictatorship, you see the factions and terrorist groups open up and it gets worse. So sometimes it's best to leave dictators where they are in control of their land. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean to say that it's right or to say that it's wrong. It's about time we stopped interfering. Now, yes, it's right that there is going to be a hostage situation. We are going to pay money. But the people that want to leave and to come to the West will come to the West. I'm not saying it's ideal. No one agrees with it. But unfortunately, that's the situation we're faced with.
Emir, I want to go back to you and something that you have posted on your social media, which I really like, and it is truthful. Okay. Emir, I want to go back to you and something that you have posted on your social media, which I really like, and it is truthful. Okay, it is truthful. So many lives, American lives and British lives and allies are lost in a conflict that, like you said, Trevor, we cannot change any. We cannot westernize Middle East. Middle East is what it is right now. And you said online, now that our guns and cannons roar came silent in Afghanistan, it's easy to become cynic. I was asked if our sacrifice was worth it. I said yes. We reduced the killers who supported 9/11 terrorists to dust. We have brought liberty to generations of people who would have never felt it. Although it appears all lost now, we planted a seed, watched it sprout. Maybe have some more clarification on this, Emir. It is a good thought. It is a good thought. I have to say that.
Sure. Well, I don't think we've decided to nation build over there out of kindness of our heart. I believe that we decided to nation build after we've reached, after conditions were set in place that, well, Al-Qaeda is pretty much on the run. They're not even in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, we cannot pursue them into Pakistan, which is a whole separate topic. So we decided to attempt to make Afghanistan a little more stable, just as every other place that we try to do, because we are of the thought, and some people can consider it Pollyannish, but we are of thought that democracy brings stability. And so through democratic process, we thought that we were going to implement some long-term solutions. But what we failed to do is recognize realities on the ground. We also failed to call out people at the height of our government who were giving the people false information. And we failed to address other nations that were bad actors, namely Pakistan. I cannot tell you how many firefights I've been in eastern Afghanistan where our enemy, we watched them cross the border into Pakistan, and they were just shooting at us. We should be able to pursue them by fire, by artillery fire, but we were denied that every time they would enter Pakistan, and I don't understand why. In Pakistan, nobody can convince me that official Islamabad did not know that Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man in the world, was a resident of one of their major cities, not in some lawless region, border region, but just immediately north of Islamabad in one of the biggest military Pakistani military communities that exists. So I believe that Pakistan has been a bad player for the past 20 years. They've been pursuing their own goals that are motivated by their fear, whether justified or not, of India, and therefore using Afghanistan as a defense in depth. I believe that what we're going to see next is enter China, because United States is completely disengaged. And I'm afraid that if you take a look at what China has done to African continent vis-a-vis construction of roads, which appear to be in service of the local population, but truly it was just to expedite the robbery of African mineral mines in order to make all the electronics that Western world has insatiable appetite for. So we're going to see the same thing in Afghanistan. And again, I don't think United States exports democracy and human rights out of kindness of our heart. I think we do it more so for the long-term stability of the world, so we can really get to business and making money.
I mean, I have to say thank you for your service. And we've seen 13 American sons come back to their families. Their bodies came back to their families, and you know, one cannot help but not wonder whether it was all worth it. And you know, seeing the American life, loss of American life, was it worth the result that we are seeing today? This is the question that is always somewhere in my mind. Trevor, I would like to go back to you, and this is also one of your actually last Facebook posts, social media posts that you've written, and it really struck me. I need to read it. I need to show it to our audiences as well, because of course we will need some more clarification. It is graphic, so I'll try to keep it clean. So you've written, I've been reading comments all over social media about Afghanistan posted by veterans who say they fought there and how shit it is that the Afghan army just gave up. Pretty shocking to know how many uneducated veterans we actually have in our community. If anyone gave up and ran away, it was the Americans, quickly followed by the UK and 39 other nations. The Afghan army lost more men in the last 7 years than the British army lost in Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Falklands, and Afghanistan combined times 10. They were all conscriptions and didn't have our training or our ethos. They were doing okay until we abandoned them. Now, FO, with your stories of gallantry and hardship.
Well, that says it all, really, doesn't it? I firmly agree with that. You know, the Afghan army, let's be honest, and I think
you've written it.
I know, yeah, and I agree with it. I'm not saying I'm going against it. I wouldn't write something down if I didn't believe in it. We abandoned the Afghan people. Now, okay, it's not a forever war, but there is a thing known as phases and strategic withdrawal plans, which clearly were not carried out by any military. They were carried out by politicians. I think Emir will agree that the withdrawal was more political than militarial. So had it been a military withdrawal, it would have worked like clockwork. It would have went in different phases. We would have moved away, and there would have been a proper handover to the Afghan army rather than just get up and go in the middle of the night. For veterans to come off and start slagging off an army full of conscripts, I think shocking, because you have to remember, you get I've heard this, President Biden came off with this utter garbage by saying there was 300,000 in the Afghan army. There's never been 300,000 in the Afghan army. That there was just rubbish, really. There was about 65,000 of them left. Bear in mind, in the last 7 years, they've had 63,000 of their own men killed fighting the Taliban, which is what? Let me get this right. 30 times more than the Americans lost. It's what? 50 times more than the British lost. So they have fought gallantry alongside us. Whenever they were moving forward and we were doing OMLTs and mentoring them, they were doing a decent job, but they needed to look over their shoulder, left and over right, and see an American to give them the thumbs up or a British to give them the thumbs up to make them see that they were going in the right direction. So now they look over their shoulder and they just didn't know, you know, are we doing the right way? You know, and regardless how good or how bad an army is, we all need mentors. You know, even British soldiers and American soldiers going through the ranks, we need mentors to bring us up the next level. So the minute we get up and we walk out, of course they're going to give up. Jesus. I just find it weird that we tend to say they just walked away. But if we look at it from a civilian point of view and we look at what happened, what we're really saying is a young Afghan army guys looking up and going, US Marines, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, British SAS, SBS, Parachute Regiment, Royal Marines, the Australian SAS, New Zealand, all those guys couldn't do it. So what the hell does Biden think 50,000 conscripts are going to do? It's never going to work.
All right, we have a different problem now. This is new information. I would like to have opinion from the three of you, all of you. So in early August, the Taliban seized U.S. military biometric devices that might help uncover people who worked with international forces. Now, from ethical dilemmas on data security to worst-case scenarios unfolding in real time, the Taliban's rise to power in Afghanistan is spurring urgent concern about the safety of data that aid groups have collected over 20 years. So the Taliban have promised an amnesty, and a spokesperson said there is no hit list. But rights groups already report reprisal killings and threats. Now, is Taliban to be trusted? And now we can easily say that the Taliban have been given the keys to the server room, biometrics. How do they get the key to the server room? How come they seize such important information? And how much are Afghan lives now really, really in danger? Tori.
Okay, first of all, I need to put a comment in for the last question you asked.
Go ahead.
I am in contact almost every single day with the Special Operations General who trained the Army, and he was in charge of the training for the entire country. He's a very high position. He said that with the backbone of the U.S. military, that the Afghan army, they're okay. And that's what was just said. But they need somebody behind them at all times. And they have an issue with killing other Muslims. They just do not want to do it. And so he's had situations where there is a Taliban, somebody Muslim, they will not stick their head up and shoot the person. And then the Americans come out saying, what are you doing? Get that guy. And our forces in America have been shot because of that. So what the general was trying to do is train police chiefs and police departments in all of the villages. And those people know how to fight because they've been doing it their entire lives. They're vested in it because it's their home. Whereas the military, and they're just there and it's a paycheck. They don't have the national pride that the UK or America has for our nation. They do not have that. They can't relate to that. So the general wanted to keep going for another 2 years until he had all of the police chiefs trained in these villages, and then they could take over and be stronger than the national army. And the generals did not let him do that. They came to his base in Afghanistan and they told him to shut it down. General Milley was there. And he has said, you know what, I have written reports for you since 2005 saying this military is not good. They can't stand on their own. I have told you every single month in a report for 15 years. So then the American generals get up there and stand there and say, oh, this was a surprise. That's a flat out lie. They knew. So as far as this biometric equipment, this was either at the embassy or Bagram base. And when it was run over by the Taliban, they took it. So it's just dereliction of duty for our military not to take that with them when they fled. I mean, that is just horrendous. So yes, they can go down. It's like a hit squad with their list, their equipment, and everything else. And so that's why we have these poor Afghans on the run, trying to save their lives. There's just no excuse for it.
Emir, do you want to comment on this?
I do. Just want to fact check something real quick. The biometric devices that we're discussing right here are handheld devices that were present at a number of thousands of checkpoints that were manned by the Afghan National Security Forces throughout the country. So the way that that the Taliban got their hands on these devices is when they overran a number of these checkpoints, and Afghan security forces just simply could not withstand them, and they retreated in a disorderly fashion. So that's how they got their hands on many of these devices. And we've been warning the administration about having more than just a single point of exit, which was Kabul. We've been advocating that we use other airfields throughout the country as points of exit, because let's face it, something that I haven't seen anybody talk much in the media is that our military withdrawal was pretty much completed, like as in our involvement in that war was over before Taliban made all these gains. I would argue that our military withdrawal was completed the day when we turned off lights at Bagram Airfield. What happened couple of weeks ago is a completely separate mission, and it's called non-combatant evacuation operation. Now, non-combatant evacuation operation, which was ran out of Kabul, State Department is in charge of those missions. State Department is in charge, so it goes all the way to the Secretary of State. Department of Defense and all the generals are in a supporting role of State Department's non-combatant evacuation operation, which was conducted in Kabul. My question is, why didn't we do it in other parts of Afghanistan? Because the administration knew that Taliban had this biometric equipment. They can check, they can scan people's retinas as they're coming through the checkpoints and pull people that work for us off to the side for further processing, if you will. And, as far as your question, can Taliban be trusted? I don't think Taliban can be trusted at all. We have 20 years. We have 20 years of daily violations of integrity that Taliban have committed. I mean, what exactly have they built for past 20 years? They have brought nothing but death and destruction on their fellow Muslims and also on the people that came there to make that place a little better than the condition was that we found it. Pakistan provided them with a place where they can rest, refit, and continue their attacks of the past 20 years. So they need to be held accountable too. But again, Taliban cannot be trusted, but Taliban can be enticed. And unfortunately, we are going back in the history, because nothing changes, where a barbaric group is blackmailing the civilized world. And we have to pay tribute to them so they would not attack us. And I just think that is absolutely sad that in 21st century, we're still repeating mistakes of, the 11th century.
Wow. Wow. And I have to point out, and Tori knows this, and of course, Emir, you have worked hard with your contacts in the State Department to get as many people as possible. Hey, that was great, I have to tell you. So Trevor has to know this. Trevor, we worked with Emir. Emir worked with his contacts in State Department. Tori worked with us too. And we have Yvette, which I spoke to earlier, to get as many people possible out of Kabul. And it's been successful in a couple of cases. It has not been successful in a couple of more cases. But you know, it was a good job. So really great job. Great job, Emir. Okay, let's go back to you, Trevor. Your take on the biometrics data that is seized by the Taliban, where they say there is no hit list, but of course, as Emir said, we cannot trust Taliban.
Well, I agree, you can't trust Taliban. But when it comes to biometrics, it's called the biometrics data capture system. There's two sides of it. There's a side that the green troops on the ground get, which your ordinary soldiers can carry. It's a bit like a set of binoculars. But there's two types. You have the hide and the seek. So the biometric data capture system comes in a hide and seek, which is quite funny, isn't it? Hide and seek. Now, the seek is carried by special forces, which was not left behind. Make it quite clear, the special forces did not leave their equipment behind. The ones which are the hide are the ones which are used by Afghan army checkpoints. But they've always had a mentor there to keep an eye on them, because it's very difficult to sort of... the way it works is you grab these binoculars, you put your hands on them. When you grab them, it takes a fingerprint scan of your fingers, and when you look through them, it takes an iris scan. The third part of that is a mouth swab, which then your DNA gets put onto your system, and it gets checked out. And that's how you enroll all the Afghan males, because it was mainly males that were enrolled. Yes, it's not good if those things are left behind, but it's not the end of the world, because what we'll do is we'll update things. Well, our companies will update our technology, and it helps us more advance. The good thing about that, whether you like it or not, is the fact that there's no... It's not the end of the world
for whom?
It's not the end of the world for anything, really. Yeah, you need to be able to be... You need to be properly trained. Now, I know soldiers that know how to work them. I ask my soldiers to go and get the data off it, and they are confused. So ordinary soldiers are confused how to get the data off them. So I don't really think the Taliban are going to be able to get the data from them, if I'm honest. Most of the data were held in US, in Bagram prison, which is where we used to take the high-value targets across for exploitation. So the reading devices to read the data from the biometric things left behind are not in Afghanistan. So, you know, it's not as bad as it seems, but I'm not trying to justify leaving stuff behind. That's wrong. It shouldn't have happened. But unless the Taliban have the right equipment to read the data from those biometrics binoculars, then it's useless to them.
Tori, I want to go back to you.
Sure.
And this is a story that you have written that really struck me. So 13 American lives lost in suicide bombing in Kabul. The article reads that you have written, meeting the President of the United States has been both an honor and a sense of comfort throughout history for military families grappling with losing loved ones to the horrors of war. That tradition seemingly came screeching to a halt in the past week, as nearly half of the Gold Star parents who lost their loved ones in the Kabul suicide blast have publicly excoriated President Joe Biden for his role in their deaths. What is his role in the deaths of the 13 service members of the United States Army military?
Well, he is supposed to be a source of comfort. President Trump, and I think both Bushes, they called the families and said, like, you have my condolences. They talked to them right after they had gotten notification. Then the president is supposed to meet the bodies at Dover Air Force Base, which is where it comes in from foreign countries, and then watch the caskets be offloaded with the American flag draped on top. So this is just a horrible scenario for any family. No president wants to go through this as well. But they're the commander-in-chief. They're the ultimate boss of these soldiers, and plus they're the leader of the free world. They should be there. What President Biden did is, to my knowledge, he did not call any of these families, but he was at Dover. Televised interviews and on Facebook and elsewhere, half of these families said they wanted either Biden nowhere near them, or they went up to him to speak to him and shake his hand at the end of the ceremony, and they just laid into him, just telling him off as far as, this is your fault and you did this to us. And they all said that Biden started talking about his son, Beau, rather than giving a story about, you know, oh, I know about your son and he was in the special forces and he did this or that, or some anecdote that he had memorized about some of these soldiers, but he had none of that. He didn't even say the names of any of them, they said. Two families repeated this on multiple TV interviews, the fathers, that he checked his watch like he had to be somewhere after every single casket that was offloaded off that plane, 13 times. And in fact, one father remarked, he said, I whisper in my wife's ear, I swear to God, if he checks it one more time, I'm going to come unglued. So anyway, this is just a sad state of affairs. This was never like this. I talked to a former veteran, who is now running for Congress, and he said he was at Fort Bragg, which is one of our military bases, after 9/11, and he was deployed right after that. And here comes President George W. Bush to visit the troops, and he was so excited he could not wait to shake his hand and meet him. It's something he'll remember forever, because he said the troops loved George Bush. They felt like he had their back, that he loved them back. So they just had the ultimate respect for him. And that's a contrast with what we're seeing now with these families of these dead soldiers that want nothing to do with President Biden. And it's just very sad, very sad.
Emir, when we go back to the topic we mentioned before, welcoming refugees makes America stronger. Do you really believe that? And is this taken in consideration, the anti-sentiment that we see in the United States, the anti-migratory sentiment, really applicable for the United States at this point?
Oh, certainly, in some elements. But that's been, I believe that's the case anywhere else in the world. I believe that a great deal of anti-immigrant sentiment that we see on display in some media and certainly on social media is really deeply rooted in racism. Because if we had waves of Norwegians arriving here as refugees, I don't think you would hear so many people clamoring about them coming here, to take our jobs or or destabilize the whole community. I think the problem is that most of the world that's seeing struggle happens to be part of the world where people other than white live. So, I think that all the racists of different backgrounds are uniting and in unison and criticizing the current administration for allowing these people to come in. And some of them are making statements in forms of question. Are these people vetted enough? Are they worthy enough? How many of them are sleeper cell agents? How many of them are coming here to kill us? But the fact of the matter is, these kind of scenarios played throughout the American history, be it applied to Bosnian refugees that arrived here in the 90s, or Somalis, or Haitians, or we can even take it back as far as Italians and Irish, as well as German immigrants. Just about every ethnic group that comes here gets hammered by the nativists. However, the good news is that the majority of Americans do not believe in most of that nonsense. Most of Americans celebrate their immigrant heritage and their ancestors from coming somewhere abroad, because it makes our nation, that mosaic makes our nation more beautiful. I believe that all these ideas that are washing up on our shores are making America very, very special and very exceptional in the world. These ideas, the good ideas stay and make America stronger. The bad ideas kind of get tossed back into the sea, and they may flow back to where they came from. But I'm 100% certain that employers who are struggling to find employees in the United States are going to welcome these refugees, because I've been hearing from a number of volunteers here in St. Louis, one of the first questions that Afghan refugees ask when they arrive is, when can I get a job?
What about the vetting process, Tori?
So most sources that I've talked to, which are members of Congress, their staff and some of the generals, they have absolutely no problem with people that help the U.S. should come here. What they have a problem with is that these people have not been vetted, and it could be anybody. Several people who are terrorists walked across the border between Mexico and U.S. and were arrested in Canada. In California. So it does happen. So here, the vetting process takes 14 steps and between 1 and 2 years. That's why there is this huge backlog. It shouldn't be a backlog of 10 years, but it takes about 2 years. And this is one of the former Homeland Security Assistant Directors said this. And there's no way that they could vet 2, 3, 4, 10,000 people in a week. They just can't do it. So if their fingerprints aren't on file, or they don't have the biometric screening. If we have one of those devices, it's not like they have, oh, here's my birth certificate and driver's license. Most of these people have nothing. So a member of Congress toured the base in Wisconsin, where there's about 3,000 people there. It might be more. And he was just alarmed to learn that none of these people had special immigrant visas, which means they have no background check. He was told that by the State Department. So they can just walk off the base and leave and go at any time into the neighborhoods. They're not prisoners of the U.S. So they're placed on a system called parole, like as if you get out of jail, but they weren't in jail. And it's supposed to be reevaluated after 2 years. So they don't have an address where they're going. I'm not sure they're going to check in after 2 years. But these were not the people that helped the U.S. So that is the problem with some members of Congress have with this system. They wanted the SIV people out, and in the first rush to get people out of the country, that plane that you see, that famous picture with about 800 people in there, those are not the people that were helping the country. So that's what is happening now. There's a debate about how to screen these people.
All right. I do have one more question, one last question for everybody. We'll start with you, Trevor. So, or Tori, you're a reporter. So is this it? Are we about to forget Afghanistan and move on to different news? Because this is what we have been seeing all over the world. We followed the Taliban takeover and their advancement, and this is what it is now. And now, hop, let's go to different news. So is this it? Is this really it? What do we say 20 years from now to Afghan people or to their children, to their grandchildren? This is what we have done. We have abandoned you, or we have tried, or media, as reporters, we have abandoned you. So is this it? Trevor?
It is for the West. It's not for China. What we will see, and it's already starting now, is the Taliban have made it quite clear already in an announcement that they are now allies with China. I don't honestly think that the Taliban will want to take on China, and I don't believe that they have the backbone for it. They will be influenced by China. All the great work that the West has done, I do believe the West has done a lot of good work, and all the infrastructure has been put in there by the West. So they've got all the infrastructure now, and all the roads and things and runways. So China will just exploit that, and China, I do believe, will help guide them in the right direction, but for the likes of lithium and for riches. So it will be the end for the West, but it won't be the end for journalists. I don't believe that one bit. It'll be more interesting now than ever to see what happens between the Kremlin and the Chinese government.
Chinese government, we have to take in consideration of all the rights, human rights violations by China, just taking in consideration Uyghur population. And I mean, how can we talk about democracy and real values and human rights when we have a country that violates those rights every day, in and out? Emir, what is your take on this?
Well, I think that the fault falls on all of us, from just the everyday person all the way to the highest echelons of government, because we are all consumers. We are dictating policy through our consumer behavior. We have enriched China and certain power brokers in China for decades, simply because, we wanted to, purchase cheaper goods. And, but so we're all sort of responsible. Perhaps it's none of our fault, but we are all responsible for the rise of China and what China is going to do with Afghanistan. I find it fresh that Taliban is going to literally depend on Chinese support, while China, as a matter of state policy, it keeps over 1 million of their ethnic minority Muslim Uyghur men, while Chinese soldiers are staying at those people's homes under so-called protection. But as Trevor is familiar with American history, as I am familiar with American history, those redcoats staying in American homes caused a lot of harms, as I would imagine. Chinese soldiers are causing harm in Xinjiang province. Am I hopeful for the future of Afghanistan? I am, because we did plant a seed over there. And although those sprouts of freedom that have come out of the soil there have been overtaken by Taliban weeds, I think ultimately, if the roots are strong, those free people of Afghanistan will overcome eventually.
Tori, your take on this?
I completely agree with Trevor. The media won't let it go just because it's a good story, not that a lot of people, frankly, aren't invested in it. They just are there for the best stories. But I think next year we're going to have a congressional elections. And I think this will be like a huge topic with that, as far as electing members of Congress. And then it'll come up again with the presidential election in 2024. But as far as the State Department and Biden, I think they just want to be done with this and move on. But it will be like the Korean War and the Vietnam War, where we didn't finish it, we left, the other side won. And as you know, especially with the Vietnam War, that dragged on for decades. Here you have military 10, 15 years later. I mean, they have cancer, they have this, they have that. So some of these tragedies don't come out for years, and then it'll rear its head. So it'll just be like a scab, I think, that just never is healed with America, with American public. For the politicians, not so much, unfortunately.
I have to cite Fatima Husseini, journalist and artist from Afghanistan, from Kabul, who managed to escape the horrors of war. She said, please do not forget Afghanistan. I would like to conclude with that. Thank you, everybody. Trevor, Tori, Emir, thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for being with
Pleasure
us. That
mine.
was Trevor Coult MC, Tori Richards, and Emir Hadžić. Welcome back. I'm bringing the incredible humanitarian, incredible woman on the show, Yvette Gonzalez, who can tell us more about what Afghans will be facing now. All the international powers are gone from the country. This is Yvette's story. Yvette is joining us from Washington, D.C. Yvette, welcome to EDONE, and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yvette, what do you make of the latest from Afghanistan? We've been watching the unbelievable but very expected scenarios unfold. What do you make of it? You've been there more than 10 years ago, so let's go back to that time when the first thought, and what is your first thought that gets to you when you see all this happening?
Well, this question I get a lot, and I have to say it is heartbreaking for me, you know, as a human, but then knowing what was done 10 years ago, knowing what has happened 20 years ago, knowing that this isn't the only country suffering right now, also beckons the repeating of history. And I think there's a lot of pain in that, and there's a lot of helplessness in that, and I think a lot of that is inspiring people to act now.
And you shared a story with me the other day, yesterday actually, to be honest, and you said, and when we read this story, it really struck me, you know, firstly as a human, then a journalist, a 9-month-old Afghan girl flying on a U.S. evacuation flight to Philadelphia died Wednesday night. Philadelphia Police State Department spokesperson confirmed to ABC News. Now, the baby girl arrived with her family from Ramstein Air Base in Germany after they were evacuated from Afghanistan. This is now the first known case of an evacuee dying after the chaotic evacuations efforts from Kabul that really brought 124,000 people to safety. Now, you as a humanitarian, what does this tell you? How does it make you feel? And what do you really think of evacuation plan that has been conducted now without being even political?
This is the hard one, right? Because we're all human first. It really got to the core of me, and that's why I shared it with you. I shared it with a lot of friends to say, you know, this is a real story of a real family with a real child that had to go through such heartbreak on top of the experience that they're having. And then this brings it home to families and say, you know, these are still family units. These are still people together in community that are just trying to survive. So the stories of everyone, you know, this is a family that probably went through a lot, and we'll never know the truth because we didn't live their story, and we don't know what happened because we didn't live their story. But reading that, it really, again, a lot of heartbreak through the last few weeks. I've been working with a lot of colleagues for the last few decades, and there isn't another word to describe what we're all feeling, because in the middle of trying to help, in the middle of supporting efforts, in the middle of still doing efforts remotely, the word that we hear repeated over and over is what heartbreak we're suffering, and what can we do?
And what can we do? That is the main question. What can we really do? And I have a feeling that now that we have seen everything going on and unfold, it's been going on over a month, I feel like the world is now again turning the blind eye to Afghanistan and to Afghan people. What should we do? How do we get the story back in the headlines? Because this is not just political. These are people that stayed behind without any assistance of any foreign power. They feel like they have been abandoned by NATO, by US and the allies and everybody else. How do we get back to this story without thinking and without just going back to the mainstream media and saying, okay, what's next?
So here's where champions come in, right? We have a lot of humanitarians who've been there, military who really served for many years, sacrificed a lot. And then you have the Afghans themselves who are telling these stories. So what I've seen the last week that's really been helpful is, yes, things are a hot topic for 1 minute and then it switches because there's always something evolving, right? So for instance, I split my time and I have to split my brain and my efforts to Haiti earthquake, to the Lebanon crisis, and then other hotspots in Africa, Madagascar drought. So all of those are constantly happening. And I remember, because I've been doing this for over 22 years, 22 years ago, I was working with USAID. It was my first time I was a contractor. And I actually spoke to a Kenyan colleague who was visiting here in DC. And when we spoke, he's like, oh, you're so young, you're starting your career. And it's great that you...
How old were you?
I was like 19.
19?
When I started.
Right, take us back.
Oh,
take us back.
Come on.
To
All right.
Let's go back.
No, but in fact, when I had this conversation, I was in my 20s because I was working. I had my master's degree. I was working, and the first thing he said is, you know, it's great that you're altruistic. It's great that you have like such passion, but let me tell you something that'll help you for the rest of your career. He's like, I've been doing this a few decades, and the best thing about your job is going to be the worst thing about your job. And he said, and this is why it always struck me, because I still think about this every single time I'm working. You will never be out of a job. And I said, okay. And he said, but the reason you'll never be out of a job is because someone will be suffering. And that was really hard to reconcile, because I thought, okay, I better be doing this for the right reasons.
And you were 19. How do you perceive a sentence like that when you were 19?
Well, I was older. I was in my 20s when I heard that. I started when I was 19.
Still young. Still very young.
Yeah, I was still young. I was in, like, feeling hopeful. I wanted to save the world. I had all this altruistic feeling in me and in my core to say, well, I had the privilege of being born in a country that afforded me the right to have an education, the right to be literate, and the right to choose my job. And I chose this because I thought, now I can give it back. And I grew up with a very strong sense of community and large family and coming from poverty and being able to say, I know your story. I know the predicament. I know what it feels like to be in it. And I know who helped us. I know how it feels to have an ally, have somebody who's an accomplice to get you out of that. And that's what I wanted to do. That's how it all started. But when I started, it was trying to do volunteer work through university organizations I was with, you know, doing my spring breaks were not spent doing spring break like other people my age. I spent my spring immersions doing volunteer work in Guatemala, in El Salvador, and that led me down the path of, can this be my career? Can this be my life? Can this be my work? And how do I make this really worth it? how do I make an impact?
This is your story, and this is not many young people will decide to go down that path. Many young people, they think about careers, they think about the money they can make, but in your field, in the humanitarian field, this is not where you work on commission, this is not where you are actually going places and seeing things that you would never expect to see. Let's go back to Afghanistan, 2008, 9, and 10, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us what you saw. Tell us your first feeling and your first thoughts when you first landed in Afghanistan. And what are the needs of the people there back then, and what are the needs of the people now that you see either from media or the reports or from Afghan people themselves? How did you fit in that story? Now that's the story, that's the question that I would like to have answered. How did you fit into that story?
So the truth is, as a foreigner, you never fit in that story. Nowhere. And I don't assume to. But when I arrived, I did as much research as I could before I left. And I had actually worked during 9/11. I had been on the Afghanistan task force in Washington, and I had not been a major part, but I was the peripheral part of a team that worked on the response. And I remember a comment at that point was from Afghan counterparts, you know, please take us seriously. Please understand that our people are facing a real danger. And can you please ensure that whoever you send in is qualified, respects the culture, and understands what solutions are. And it stuck with me. So when I, years later, came in for a program, I was there to design a program with our Afghan partners. I was with an NGO, a non-governmental organization. And when I arrived, no matter how much research I had done, I had interviewed all my colleagues, I had spoken to our Afghan colleagues and really trying to understand everything from what I should know. What's the culture like? What should I anticipate? What are the no-nos? What are the things I should do to do no harm? And how should I honor local communities and acknowledge that I'm a guest? How do I best do that? And even with all that, I was kind of informed. When I arrived, I was still shocked because the reality on the ground is always different. It's, you know, often you find, oh, that was so exaggerated on the news. And now the reality is people are living, raising children, going to school, going to work, feeding. Life is continuing amidst this kinetic zone, this active kinetic zone, and life goes on. And what does that resilience mean? And so I learned a lot. The one thing that struck me when I arrived is, you know, I tend to blend in most places I go.
We just saw it. We actually just saw it on the pictures. You blended very well. I mean,
and so I have to be aware.
Exactly. Let's show the pictures one more time of you in Afghanistan. And other all around the world as well. I mean, you really do blend in. And this is not even, I'm not racially profiling you or anything, but this is the way.
It's a reality of.
That's the reality of you being there, you not just assimilating, but trying to, as you said, if I want to help you, I need to understand you, and of course respect whatever the culture is. And this is exactly what you have done. Continue, please.
No, and I have to say that was I had to learn very early what it meant to blend, and what it meant to have like a chameleon life, and what it meant not to blend, and to know both the advantages and the disadvantages. Because if I blend, that means I have to honor the local culture, and if I don't, it could offend someone. It could really set back a lot of trust, and so it's working really hard when I arrive to understand before and when I arrive.
What does it mean when you say I have to know when to blend and I have to know when not to blend? Who do you blend to and who do you not blend to?
So let's say, for example, in Afghanistan, when I arrived, I was surprised to know that I looked Afghan, and I didn't think I would. And I had to know, how do I dress? How do I respect the culture of the norms that are expected of me so I don't offend anyone and I can be productive? How do I speak to both men and women? How do I speak to authorities? How do I best get respect from my colleagues when I'm in a high-level meeting? A lot of what we did was work also with advising ministers across different sectors. And when you're doing that, you have to also understand what are the political culture that you're facing, and how do you respect that, and how are you productive inside of that. And I have to say, with the Afghan counterparts, we were always welcome. I was never treated with any disrespect. It was always respectful, always very kind, and I felt very honored to be part of that story, that part of the story. And I also felt very privileged to be able to contribute that way. And that was the gift of that time. So that period, 2008, 2010, what was surprising was how welcoming all our partners were, even as I traveled outside of Kabul, and how very readily information was shared so that we could make the best of the situation with the programs that we had at hand. And how could we really participate with Afghans and have them lead everything. And that was really the thing I was keen on, and our whole team.
And in those 20 years you spent there from 2008 to 2010, so that's approximately 2 years. Was it ever clear to you whether you sensed it, or was it clear to you through your partners, Afghan partners, that this, what we're seeing today, could have ever happened? Was it ever clear that the Taliban could possibly be a regime in this country without being, again, and getting political? Now, I'm asking you this because during those 20 years, they were always present one way or the other. So have you ever experienced anything? Have you ever seen anything? Was it ever any sign that this, what we're seeing today, could have been prevented, or could have happened back then?
So these are all fair questions. And I think the first thing, was it ever clear? No, it's never clear. But when we go in as an NGO, as a nonprofit, when you're doing humanitarian work, there is the credos of you are impartial, you are neutral, and you are there to respond to the need for water, food, shelter, the basic needs, right? And then from that, revitalization. And so that staying neutral is so fundamental, because it doesn't matter in the moment of contributing and helping and providing assistance, aid, support, or programs. You are there as a human being helping a human being. The indications of any kind of rumbling at the surface, which are, for me, every country has that. Every country I worked in, I'm a guest. I'm not from there. I'm a guest, and I'm very aware of my place in that, and that there are layers and layers of history and culture and context that I may never be privy to, and you have to acknowledge that. Inside of that context, for you, for working as a humanitarian, is how do I abide by those standards that I'm aware of, and how do I make the most impact that's positive for these people within that framework? That said, there's always, in every context, this is Somalia, Haiti, Mali, Congo, Nepal, Afghanistan, the rumbling at the surface of, I know there's something I don't know, and I will never know. And I have to accept that. And as informed as I can be, there's always going to be this layer of, what are the indicators that something else is going on? And so to that end, you have to constantly check in with your local team, with local communities, local leaders, and you have to be fair about that. So when I arrived, I had to be taught by my Afghan counterparts, here's what we're looking for as we do our projects. And for example, if there were more women covered up in the streets, they said, these are the days that you can't go out, or these are the days where it's probably going to get a little, dicey outside. Please, don't do any movements, or, things like that, where there were small indicators that, there might be something happening, and then they would dissipate, and then they would come. So again, very unpredictable, but always the chance.
All right, let's go back to women and girls under the Taliban regime. We've seen pictures of girls in the basements trying to get their education. Now, is this something that we are going to be seeing in 21st century after foreign powers, including all of us, have been there and basically done nothing?
The hard part about that question is that we can't predict, right? It changes every day.
But does it infuriates you to see that today happening?
It has always made me hurt to see that happening, not just in this country. It happens across many countries and many cultures. And somewhere deep inside me, it's not even infuriation. It is a deep sadness. It is a deep frustration for what is the solution. And I am very much always looking for an answer. When I do these programs, I don't do a traditional, like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to help with this team, we're going to leave. I come in thinking there has to be something in this country, in this culture that can help. There has to be a solution that's already here that we've overlooked as an humanitarian community. And what is it? And so, yes, it frustrates me to say we haven't found a solution or there isn't one presently. What will it be? And that's actually what drives a lot of innovation for these programs. A lot of what drives those people who have been dedicated for decades to be in these countries, in these contexts, and a lot of the Afghans too, who are local, is how can we make this better? What is the answer? That's the frustrating part. There are answers, but what are they here and now and today? And as this evolves, because we're watching this evolve, what are those answers going to be? How are they going to evolve? And to what extent can there be external support? And to what extent should there not be external support? So all of these things are happening simultaneously. It makes it very, very complex.
Now, all the humanitarian organizations have been denied to enter Afghanistan to give aid and to give support to those who really need it. What will happen? And you've been there, you know how it is. What will happen now? What do you think will happen now without humanitarian organizations being able to get to those most in need?
So I think what's happening, there are groups that are still on the ground. You know, you have a group like Emergency, they're still providing medical assistance, they're still in country. And well, there is a will, there's a way, right? And so there's, and then there's emerging news that there will be humanitarian aid allowed in country. That's not confirmed yet, but we're hoping that that's going to be at least a minimal ability and an access point. And there are groups who stayed, and there are groups who are there who are definitely helping. So a lot of the efforts that I'm supporting now are teams, you know, that are still on the ground. Their Afghan counterparts are still working. There's still hospitals. There's still medical work to do. There are still things that are happening. I think we'll know more in the coming months about what accessibility still remained, that it wasn't a vacuum of all of it. You know, there are a lot of hardworking humanitarians still on the ground, and they're doing their best.
That is such courage. That is such courage. Being there after everything that has happened, knowing that the Taliban is looking for people who are there, who are connected to foreigners, that is courage to me, and also courage of you still being involved. And I can say this on the record, I know you have been involved, and we've been communicating together over messaging and over calls, trying to know how much more of that help people need, and that demand for need is bigger and bigger, and it grows from day to day. Yvette, what do you think? Who should be listening to us right now? Now, you're a humanitarian, you do things, you've been there, you do things, you know exactly what people need. Who should be listening to us right now?
That question is really hard because everyone should be listening. And when I say everyone, I mean there's a spectrum of people who are involved, right? There's a spectrum of, there are Afghan, there are diaspora, there are humanitarians. That's just one subset of a larger international effort. There are politicians, there are advocates, there are journalists. That whole range of people are involved and tied by the daunting feeling of wanting to help, right? The one thing you get from people right after something is emerging and announced like this is, how can I help? What can I do? And these are plugging into each other right now. Like, how can we help each other? I will say that for at least in the realm of what I can see online and through my networks and through all my colleagues, there's an activation that took place. And that means there are people who are willing to share information, willing to support, and willing to find ways to continue doing work when it's safe. And all of that is really discreet, so that no one inadvertently hurts anyone. And that's one of the other, fundamental things of this effort is do no harm, meaning try to help, find out the right way, but please don't make it worse. And in most instances, that is, let's work discreetly to get work done, see where we can open up avenues of real support that can be in country and out. And there's a lot of people involved right now who I have to say, this hasn't gone off their radars. And I'm really glad to see that in that spectrum of people and those disciplines that are involved, it's, I would say that the effort is alive, well, and today people are just as passionate to help as they were 3 weeks ago.
And just to conclude, Yvette, would you go back? Even though you're still working on it and discreetly, obviously now on air, but would you go back? Would you go back to Afghanistan if you were presented that opportunity?
When it's safe, yes. Again, it's that timing of knowing when it's safe for me to be a contributing member. Yes. If it's not contributing right now and I'm in the way and I create a situation that's worse for others, no, of course I wouldn't. And that's the thing that you have to understand when you make a determination, like, am I going to Somalia? Am I going to Mali? Or am I going to Congo? Or am I going to Pakistan? When there's a range of opportunity to help, is it right to help in that moment? Are you going to create a distraction? Are you going to make things worse? Those are all the things that I consider when I think about, is this a time and a place where my presence is needed, welcome, and productive? And if it's not, you have to wait.
Like a real humanitarian. That's a real humanitarian. Yvette, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your story. We really enjoyed seeing your way and your path through all these years, where you've been, especially the story in Afghanistan. You have contributed so much. We are very proud of you. Of course, stay in touch, and thank you for speaking to us and being on it once more.
Thank you for honoring these stories and for keeping the story alive.